So, good morning, everybody, and this morning, before I came to Singapore, when I was in Bangkok, I had these surgeries on my head, scalp, and so they I have this very fair skin. And in dermatology, it's called a Celtic complexion, Northern European complexion, which tends to not receive the sun rays very well. You get cancers, skin cancers. So living in Thailand for many years and in tropical countries, and being a monk, going bareheaded, because in Thailand monks can't wear hats or anything, the skin really deteriorated. So in England, I had to receive other surgeries, and then in Bangkok itself, there's very good plastic surgeon that likes to remove these cancers. So that's what happened just a couple of weeks ago. And so yesterday, the Dr. Ing-Wai Chong came to remove these stitches. And he did a very good job, and the scalp is much more comfortable today than it's been for 2 weeks. So that's why I have this head filled with bandages. So this is the nature of the body. It's subject to all kinds of diseases or tumors, cancers, all kinds of pain and different levels of pain and discomfort. And that's the nature of the body. So when reflecting on the body, on your own body, then, we're very identified with it. With the passport, we all have a photograph of our face. In the passport, we have pictures of our mother, father, family, and ourselves, and pictures of the body. So the bodies, to most people, are what they identify with. So it's this identification with the body is an illusion, because the body is subject to disease and old age and sickness, and eventually dies. So the attitude of the worldly attitudes is all about birth and death. We identify with the unsatisfactory conditions of the body, of the mental states that come and go and change. And these mental states are very changeable. When you win the lottery, you're very happy. When you lose everything, you're very unhappy. And so just the worldly dhammas affect us emotionally. And happiness that kind of worldly happiness is depending on success and good fortune and good karma and good health and all the best we can think of we want for our bodies or a sense of our personal self. And we want this for our families. But we all experience the aging process of our parents. And we see mothers and fathers that were once vigorous and vital trainers of us in our childhood grow old, and then the problems of old age, the body tends to lose its strength and its agility, and we have problems with all kinds of skeletal problems, muscle problems, knee problems, hip problems. And that's why in the Buddhist teaching, he's not reinforcing this false identity. So this is, since I've been practicing, mainly my reference point for nearly 60 years has been the Four Noble Truths. It's a brilliant teaching in itself, because it gives you the freedom to investigate this human state that we're experiencing, such as the body that we identify with. When we see it personally, then people praise it, say you're so beautiful, then we feel happy, and they say, oh, you're ugly, then we feel depressed, and we are subject to public opinion, to modern views of fashion and beauty affect us emotionally. And in mindfulness with vipassana meditation is insight into the way things are. Then we begin to see ourselves in a different way, rather than the limited forms of our personality, our physical appearance, our identities, mental identities. We begin to realize our true nature is perfect. It's conscious awareness. That's what we call the gate to the deathless. It's through mindfulness, conscious awareness, that we begin to see through the illusions of our conditioning, our society, our limited forms in both mental and physical. So this is like realizing your true nature is free and pure, where when you see yourself as a physical body, as a man or a woman, as whether you're wealthy or poor, male or female, we are always seeing our identities with these conditions, which are, this grasping of these conditions is the very cause of suffering. So the first noble truth of suffering is to be understood. Now, when I talk about the deathless, in Pali, amatta Dhamma, amatta means deathless, that which doesn't die, is not born and doesn't die. Dhamma, amatta Dhamma, the deathless reality that we are, only can be, the gateway. The door to realizing what we really are is with awareness, mindfulness. And the Satipatthana Sutta, the four foundations of mindfulness, very skillful kind of directional signs to investigate the body, the feeling, the sensitivity that we experience through the senses in the body, the mental conditioning, the emotion, the memories, the consciousness that we experience through senses, and then Dhamma. The fourth foundation is Dhamma, which is given to us in these forms of the Pali Canon, the suttas, that are available very ubiquitously right now. When I became a Buddhist back in 1955, it's very hard to find any literature in English on Buddhism in the United States. Very difficult. So I used to I was in the Navy at the time, and I combed the bookstores in San Francisco. The home port for the ship I was on was in San Francisco. So San Francisco is a very kind of modern, up-to-date, trendy city. At that time it was, and it still is to this day, combing the bookstores for English translations of Buddhist texts, or just on Buddhism, on Tibetan Buddhism, on Zen Buddhism. And at that time, in the 1950s, Zen Buddhism was becoming quite fashionable, especially in the San Francisco Bay Area, Berkeley, Oakland, San Francisco. So they were acquiring books on Zen Buddhism in English. So that's the kind of thing of these books all point to the deathless, the Amata Dhamma. Now, one never thinks of oneself as deathless. We all, there's an idea about immortality in Western culture, and in pre-Christian European culture, the Greek and Roman culture, they believed in gods and goddesses that were immortal. But is that deathless? Is these gods and goddesses have gender, they're male or female, they have shapes. They're images of perfection that we create in the mind. Then when Europe became Christian, then immortality is still very personal. Some people are saved, some people are not saved. And if you're saved, then you become immortal. But immortality, or deathless reality, is here and now. It's not something that you attain when you die. And so this, in the Theravada and Pali terms, when we talk about Dhamma, it's apparent here and now. When we chant in morning pujas, evening pujas, we define Dhamma as apparent here and now, santitiko Dhamma. And what is apparent here and now is, what we see, hear, smell, taste, touch, think, and feel is what we might look for. We go out to say, well, it's like this. It's a meditation hall in Singapore, and that we know this through the information we receive. But what is apparent here and now, every moment, every minute of your life, is your consciousness. So Dhamma, when we talk about Dhamma, or consciousness, or the deathless, or Nibbana, these are words that, as best you can, created in Pali or other languages, to describe something that's apparent here and now, when you actually are here and now, right at this moment. It's apparent here and now, you're conscious right now. If I ask every one of you in this room if you're conscious, you're going to say yes. So Dhamma, or deathless, is apparent here and now. It's mindfulness, sati sampajanya, awareness, that we're encouraged, this whole retreat is to encourage you to trust this awareness. Not what you think awareness is. When you think, am I aware? Then you start thinking about yourselves. You start thinking, well, my mind wanders and I can't concentrate the mind on, I can't still it, it's not silent. A lot of sitting still for so long is I'm not used to it, and my mind wanders, and I want to be mindful, but I can't be. This is all thinking. You're thinking, I'm not mindful. Because you conceive mindfulness as something you should have, or you've got to get, rather than realizing here and now, this is it. This is awareness, mindfulness, awareness, consciousness, awareness. They're all the same thing. So when we take bhikkhu ordination, the emphasis is on to realize nibbana, to live this life as a Buddhist monk, a samana, to realize nibbana. So nibbana becomes a goal, an object that becomes desirable, because it's like, what is nibbana? What does it mean? And well, it's eternal happiness, or it's freedom, or we have various ways of freedom from delusion, but it's also the same thing as deathless. When we realize consciousness, pure consciousness, not consciousness through the senses, which is always subject to change. So we usually think of consciousness as sensory consciousness. Now, sensory consciousness is where we're always sending our consciousness through the senses to objects of the senses. So we love visualization. We love to look at things, sightsee, shop for things, try and go to museums, or various ways of sending our eye consciousness to objects that interest us, are beautiful or pleasant. And then when our eyes contact something unpleasant or ugly, we don't want to look at it. We want to be turned away, or wish it wasn't here. So eye consciousness is very dependable on what the objects that you have are available, whether they're beautiful and pleasant or ugly and unpleasant. The same goes for hearing, like hearing cacophonous noise and unpleasant sounds. We don't like that. So ear consciousness, nose consciousness, physical consciousness, bodily consciousness, mental states, emotions, and memories are all subject to change and arising and ceasing. So awareness is our ability to witness the presence and absence of a condition. And in worldly life, modern life, worldly life, materialistic philosophies that are dominant now everywhere in the world are based on, on beauty and comfort and luxury and wealth and success, sending our consciousness through the senses in the body to their objects that are pleasant, and we get angry, upset, blame others, blame governments and politicians and presidents and tyrants and so forth for all the unpleasant things that we witness in our lives. So this praise and blame is very much a a modern way of reacting to the sensory objects that we see, hear, smell, taste, touch, think, and feel. Like we all have memories, where we have retentive memories. So we can remember the past. And retentive memories, we tend to remember the pleasant or the unpleasant experiences of our childhood, our teenage, our youth. So just noticing for myself, at my age, I have a lot of memories. And so, there's memories of unpleasant memories of childhood, still remember them. Or the pleasant memories, I still remember at 88. That's a retentive memory. I can still feel emotions. I remember at Wat Pah Pong years ago, when I was a junior monk, Luang Po Cha gave me a kuti, a hut to live in the forest, and I really liked the place, liked the hut. It was quite remote, by myself, and then a lot of unpleasant memories from my past would arise. When I'm sitting in this kuti, and I'd feel anger. Get really angry over something that happened 20 years before, something that hurt my feelings badly and was unfair and unjust that I experienced. And I could get really angry sitting in this kuti, just remembering this event of 20 years before. And I just contemplated that, nothing of the immediate conditions was making me angry. I liked the kuti, I liked the forest, I liked Wat Pah Pong, Luang Por Cha, I liked Thailand. But then sitting alone in a kuti, then these memories arise, and then you pay attention to them, you grasp them. And you can get really angry over something that happened when you were 10 years old or whatever, because that's the grasping of memory. And we have retentive memories. So we remember the abuse or unfairness or injustices we received in our lives, and this is part of every human experience. Society, any society anywhere in the world, you're going to be praised or blamed or treated properly or improperly. This is just the way the world is. It's not going to be just accolades of praise and happiness and good grades and loving friends and stable family conditions and beauty for the eyes. We're reflecting on the way it is, this planet, this world that we experience through the senses. Is like this. It has its pleasant aspects and its unpleasant aspects. But that which is awareness is neither pleasant nor unpleasant. It transcends pleasant and unpleasant, both through the seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching experiences. So then I'd ask myself, is consciousness angry and upset over something that happened 20 years ago? And then I stopped grasping these memories, and I realized that conscious awareness never gets angry, never gets jealous, never gets frightened, never is greedy. It's absolutely pure. And that's what our true nature is this purity, rather than this Dhamma, this reality is our real refuge. Where if we, when people grow old, if they're not mindful, if they've not meditated or developed awareness about themselves in the world, then old people get very grumpy or complaining or blaming or, because getting old is unpleasant. And if all you've ever done is try to experience pleasant experience, like being healthy and vigorous, athletic, youthful, beautiful, then when all that changes, you feel like you're no good, nobody loves you, you're a failure, and on like that. So you can become very depressed or angry in old age, because it's not beautiful to be old. And so then ask yourself, am I really this body that's so fragile that I can't just make it stay young as much as I want to be young and vigorous and healthy? It has its own karmic tendencies and limitations that are beyond my control and not always the best karma. It's not always the most excellent. And we identify with these karmic conditions which change, and we don't know what we're doing. We're not aware of what we're doing. So this Buddhist teaching is about awakening to reality. Wake up to what's real, rather than try to perfect life through the objects of sense or through the body itself, through the senses. Because the senses are also undependable. So liberation is realizing your true nature. And when I tell to people or say people their true nature is absolutely pure, that's hard to believe for most people, because we see ourselves as always these changing conditions which we can see are not perfect. And we can see faults, weaknesses, fears, unwholesome desires, and all kinds of emotional states and memories that are far from purity. They can be very impure, they can be mean or ugly, and we see, we identify with all these negative traits, and we feel that we're impure. Our basic nature is impure. So we worry when we die, what's going to happen when we die, because what we identify with can never really be absolutely pure or perfect. So there's a fear of death, because we're all experiencing consciousness in a form we call life. And that's what we know and we identify with. But we don't know what happens when we die. We have various scenarios about what happens when we die. If you've been good, you go to heaven. If you've been bad, you go to hell. Or you get reborn, you've been reincarnated. If you've been mean enough, you get reborn as some lower state, as a dog or a frog or an octopus. Imagine anything about, how you might think about yourself because of various thoughts and memories and actions that you remember in the present moment that were unwholesome or you regret or you're guilty about. And then the idea that you have to be absolutely pure to go to heaven be unmitigated goodness, a saint. None of us in our forms are saints. No, being human is like this. You have sexual desires, you have emotions. We feel greedy, we want things. We feel jealous, we feel anger and resentment. We get confused, we feel despair and hopelessness. And all that, these are emotions that are very common to human beings. And these are the dramas of life, all about romance, adventure, excitement, about crime, adultery, about gangsters and guns and wars and sexual activities and all kinds of things of what we call entertainment, because they excite or cause emotional reactions when we go to the cinema. Because that's just natural to be excited. Sexual energy is exciting. Murder and killing and crime are exciting. Imagine going to a movie in Singapore where the movie's all about people that are totally good through a whole 2-hour film. They never say a bad word, they have halos around their heads, and they're impeccably good through the whole 2 hours film. It would be boring. You get sex in it, it's exciting, you get violence. All these things are exciting to the human mind, to the senses, sensory consciousness, to our emotional habit patterns. So there's nothing wrong with this. I'm not saying you shouldn't go to the movies or the cinema, but when our life is based on seeking excitement, romance, adventure, excitement, then we, as we get older, we find that our ability to have adventures, to be romantic, we get limited in our movements, in our vision, in our hearing. These are all what we don't want. So this emphasis on a true nature, I'm implanting the seed in your minds, and when you think about yourself, you think, no, I'm not pure and I'm not mindful and all that, but don't believe it. Your mind will say all kinds of things about yourself. You've got discriminatory minds. We're educated to discriminate. This is good, this is bad, this is right, this is wrong. But, we have ideas of moral principles and principles and ideals, standards that we create with our minds, and ideals that we like to we intend or hope to live up to. But it's all done through this illusion. I am the body, I am this person, I have these weaknesses, I'm very imperfect, I get jealous, I have a lot of fear and anxiety, I worry all the time. How do you conquer worry? And so these are the emotional habit patterns we identify with, which create suffering. But awareness of these patterns is wisdom. Awareness and wisdom go together. Wisdom is not something you get from a book or teacher. It's something natural. Dhamma is natural. It's not created. When we think of it as beautiful or peaceful, those are the English words that make it sound desirable. But waking to reality is about here and now. Because experience is always here and now. You can't experience the future. You imagine the future. You can create images of hopes or dreads, fears about the future. But that's always here and now that we're doing that. So the future is what we hope will be okay and we fear will be unhappy or miserable. Whatever tendencies you have as an individual psychologically to create problems about the future. What's the future of Singapore? So right now we know Singapore is like this, which is more or less accepting this reality of the experience of Singapore at this moment is like this. It's here and now in this meditation hall. But in the future, you can imagine it going any which way. Or the past is a memory. So time is an illusion. Time is about the past and the future. The present, now is the knowing, now is the eternal Dhamma, the deathless Dhamma. Eternity is now. So eternity is another word, and it's used oftentimes in poetry. But eternity can only be now because it's not about eternity in the future or eternity of the past, from previous lives. How can we remember previous lives? How far back can I trace my previous lives? It's a subject of great interest with many people, trying to remember what they were before they were born in this form. Because it's interesting to think of yourself as, was I a Buddhist monk in a previous life? One Chinese monk in California told me I was a Chinese monk in a previous life. Another psychic English woman told me I was Luang Por Chah's grandmother in a previous life. Both were, quite pleasant to be. Think myself as Luang Por Chah's grandmother, or a Chinese monk in old China. These are pleasant perceptions, but I don't remember any of that. So my memory is limited to this lifetime, and that's all you need to have. The memories that you have from this life are enough to learn that they're impermanent and not self. Whether I was a Chinese monk in a previous life was still the same thing, impermanent and not self, or Ajahn Chah's grandmother. Memories, just that perception of Luang Por Chah's grandmother comes and goes in consciousness. It is born and dies. Just remembering those words is the arising and ceasing of conditions. Those are conditions. So learning to trust awareness is the emphasis, but not trust what you think or feel. You can't trust what you think you are. Don't believe what you think you are as a physical personality, or what you've been told you are. Some people tell us what they think of us. What somebody tells you are, or you believe you are, is an illusion. It's not to be trusted. So this sense of conscious awareness, the deathless Dhamma, Amatta Dhamma, ultimate reality is here and now. It's timeless. We chant Santitiko, apparent here and now, Akaliko, timeless. And you can't imagine timelessness. Because thinking process is all about time. Words are about time. They arise and cease. They're time-bound conditions. They begin and end. They born and die. And that which is aware of the arising and ceasing is the deathless reality that we actually are. So what will happen to me when I die is a fair enough question. We all wonder about that as personalities. Some monks hope to be reborn and lay people want to be reborn in Deva realms, Brahma realms, in the cosmology of Buddhism. So you've got Deva realms, Brahma realms. These are all desirable realms in themselves. Being a Deva, being born in a place where you're beautiful and young for 84 million eons, that sounds wonderful. 84 million eons is a very long time according to our perception of time. So we practice to be good persons, good people, in order to make a lot of merit, try to be as good as we can be in order to hopefully be reborn as a Deva, as a Brahma, and on like that. This is imagination. These are images we create. And they're beautiful objects, like Devas are always beautiful. And they have ethereal bodies, and they don't have a food body anymore. When you get reborn in the Deva realm, you're no longer stuck with this heavy food body, which requires eating vegetables and rice and meat and fish every day to survive. But Devas, they live on ambrosia, which I don't know what that is, but it sounds very nice. So these are, imagining the Deva realms, the Brahma realms, is not wrong, but the Buddha was pointing something much more important than that, just trying to be a good person, to be reborn in the Deva realm, but to realize the total end of suffering, to be free completely from birth and death in any form, whether it's a miserable form or an ethereal one. The forms are all unsatisfactory and impermanent. So Devas eventually get old and die. And Brahmas, I don't know about Brahmas, whether they, well, probably they do too, because they're forms. They're beautiful forms, so they're imaginary forms. But Dhamma is not an image. It's not. You can't imagine Dhamma. You have symbols for it, like Dhammajaka wheels, and that are the best, the Buddhists have come up with. But you can't make a human form of Dhamma, where Buddha you can. You can have Buddha images like we have here at Kongming San, beautiful Buddha images, because Buddha is, was a human being, a historical figure, a sage that is still remembered in this present time. And he was a human being. And so because of that, then Buddhists have that kind of form, usually, so it's always male, never female. And Buddhas are, you can make images of them. You have Kuan Yin, or a beautiful, lovely female form for compassion, and you can have images of compassion. But of Dhamma, you can't, there's no image. You can't make it into a beautiful man or woman or any other form other than a symbol. So Dhammajaka is merely an external symbol to remind us of Dhamma. But when I gave you the refuges at the beginning of this retreat, I like giving these refuges because I'm giving you something really wise and good. Just Bhutang Saranang Gacchami, Dhammang Saranang Gacchami, Sanghang Saranang Gacchami. It can be ceremonial, chanting ceremonies, traditional. But actually, when you realize Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, through wisdom, through understanding, through investigation, these are beautiful words to instill in people's minds. Because it's not just to believe in Buddha or Dhamma or Sangha, but it's the whole aim and purpose of the Buddhist teachings, the suttas, is to realize this for yourself. Ajjatang vaitida povinuhi, to be realized individually. We each have to realize this for ourselves. So as much as I would like to have a magic wand and enlighten you all with my wisdom, I can't do that. So I mean, as a person, I'd like to do that, but knowing the limitation of personality and form, I can't do that. Neither could Gautama the Buddha of ancient India. But he was a teacher, a pointer. He wasn't pointing at himself. He wasn't pointing to his physical body as the Buddha, but to the reality of waking to the Dhamma, or true nature. And when you realize that all of us, all humanity, all creatures share this perfect consciousness. So are dogs and cats and pigs and horses. The consciousness is the same consciousness, but the forms are different. So animals their karma is their form, which they don't have this reflective capacity to investigate their reality. They're bound to procreate their species and survive as a creature, a conscious form, but it can't reflect on itself. Where the human condition is such. That's why we can have Buddha Rupas to remind us of this human birth is a great gift to have, because it's our ability to realize Dhamma, ultimate reality for ourselves. And this is the whole momentum of Buddha Dhamma, is to, it's not a command, it's not about belief, but it's like giving you the right, the freedom to investigate your life. And these Buddhist concepts, teachings, are directional signs, like the 4 foundations of mindfulness. They're just directions, how to look at the body, the feelings, the mental states, Dhamma, using the Dhamma teachings, not grasping them and holding on to them to become a Buddhist Dhamma teacher, but by actually putting them into practice. Like the Four Noble Truths is practical. It's not mystical and ethereal and beyond anyone's ability. So we have another sutta I've treasured during my monastic life is there is the unborn, uncreated, unformed, unconditioned. And because there is the unborn, uncreated, unformed, unconditioned, there is escape from the born, the created, the formed, the conditioned. So I thought that's an announcement of freedom. There is the unborn, uncreated, unformed, unconditioned. But what is it? Try to imagine the unborn. Try to make images or imagine anything that's unborn, uncreated, unformed, unconditioned. Where the born, the created, the formed, the conditioned, you could imagine anything, any form. But identifying with the born, the created, the formed, the conditioned is a trap. Because that's very limitation. It's about birth and death. It's about success and failure, praise and blame, happiness and suffering. But there is an escape from the born, the created, the formed, the conditioned. There's the unborn, uncreated, unformed, unconditioned, and that can only be conscious awareness here and now. You can't imagine it, but you are that. That's the true nature. So when you realize this, there's nothing to fear. Because fear always is the result of attachment to the born, the created, the formed, the conditioned. To imagination, fear about the future, worry. Worry is a common problem in modern society such as this one. People worry about the future. Anxiety and worry haunt us. Stalk us in our lives, because the future is unknown and we can, and when you grow and life is changing, and it's not always changing the way we would like it to change. And so the future is a place to worry about the future. There's a lot to worry about in the future. The past, there's always a lot to regret or feel guilty about. Things we've said that we regret or done that we regret because we remember them. So people suffer from guilt and remorse, fear, anxiety, worry about the future, and all that is happening now. But that which is aware of fear, anxiety, and worry, and regret and guilt isn't regretful, isn't guilty, isn't worried, isn't anxious, isn't frightened. So I offer this as a reflection for today.